also explains the general principle that makes it possible to enter.
So everyone has it? Yeah?
The Bhagavad Gita also explains the general principle.
Page 23, this is the last one. So the Bhagavad Gita 8.6 also explains the general principle that makes it possible to enter the spiritual kingdom simply by thinking of the Supreme at the time of death. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tvajati ante kalevaram tam tam evati kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavita. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his present body, in his next life he will attain to that state without fail. Now first we must understand that material nature is a display of one of the energies of the Supreme Lord. In the Vishnu Puran 6.761, the total energies of the Supreme Lord are delineated. Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta Chetra Kyakhya Tatha Para Avidya Karma Samyagya Tritiya Shaktir Ishyate. The Supreme Lord has diverse and innumerable energies which are beyond our conception. However, great learned sages or liberated souls have studied these energies and have analyzed them into three parts. All of the energies are of Vishnu Shakti, that is to say, they are different potencies of Lord Vishnu. The first energy is Para, transcendental. Living entities also belong to the superior energy, as has already been explained. The other energies, or material energies, are in the mode of ignorance. At the time of death, either we can remain in the inferior energy of this material world, or we can transfer to the energy of the spiritual world. So the Bhagavad Gita 8.6 says, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tvajante ante kalevaram tam tam evati kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavita. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his present body, in his next life he will attain to that state without fail. In life, we are accustomed to thinking either of the material or of the spiritual energy. Now, how can we transfer our thoughts from the material energy to the spiritual energy? There are so many literatures which fill our thoughts with the material energy, newspapers, magazines, novels. Our thinking, which is now absorbed in these literatures, must be transferred to the Vedic literatures. The great sages, therefore, have written so many Vedic literatures, such as the Puranas. The Puranas are not imaginative, they are historical records. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 21:22, there is the following verse. Maya Mukta Jivera Nahi Svata Krishna Jnana Jivera Kripaya Koila Krishna Veda Purana. The forgetful living entities or conditioned souls have forgotten their relationship with the Supreme Lord and they are engrossed in thinking of material activities. Just to transfer their thinking power to the spiritual sky, Krishna Dvapayana Vyasa has given a great number of Vedic literatures. First, he divided the Vedas into 4, then he explained them in the Puranas, and for less capable people, he wrote the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, there is given the Bhagavad Gita. Then all Vedic literature is summarized in the Vedanta Sutra, and for further guidance, he gave a natural commentation on the Vedanta Sutra called Srimad Bhagavatam. We must always engage our minds in reading these Vedic literatures. Just as materialists engage their minds in reading newspapers, magazines, and so many materialistic literatures, we must transfer our reading to these literatures which are given to us by Vyasadeva. In that way, it will be possible for us to remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death. That is the only way suggested by the Lord, and he guarantees the result. There is no doubt. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmara yuddhacha mai arpita mano buddhir mam vivashe ashamshaya. Therefore, Arjuna should always think of me in the form of Krishna and at the same time continue your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. He does not advise Arjuna simply to remember him and give up his occupation. No, the Lord never suggests anything impractical. In this material world, in order to maintain the body, one has to work. Human society is divided according to work into 4 divisions of social order: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. The Brahmana class or intelligent class is working in one way, and the Kshatriya or administrative class is working in another way. And the mercantile class and the laborers are all tending to their specific duties. In the human society, whether one is a laborer, merchant, administrator or farmer, or even if one belongs to the highest class and is a literary man, a scientist, a theologian, he has to work in order to maintain his existence. The Lord therefore tells Arjuna that he did not give up his occupation, but while he is engaged in his occupation, he should remember Krishna. If he doesn't practice remembering Krishna while he is struggling for existence, then it will not be possible for him to remember Krishna at the time of death. I'm going to repeat this line, it's very powerful. If he does not practice remembering Krishna while he is struggling for existence, then it will not be possible for him to remember Krishna at the time of death. Wow. Lord Chaitanya also advises this. He says, Kirtaniya Sadahari. One should practice chanting the names of the Lord always. The names of the Lord and the Lord are non-different. So Lord Krishna's instructions to Arjuna to remember me and Lord Chaitanya's injunction to always chant the names of Lord Krishna are the same instruction. There is no difference because Krishna and Krishna's name are non-different. In the absolute status, there is no difference between reference and referent. Therefore, we have to practice remembering the Lord always, 24 hours a day, by chanting His names and molding our lives' activities in such a way that we can remember Him always. So nice, huh? So wonderful. So we can maybe open it up for discussion. I was just thinking that this transference of our attention from material energy to spiritual energy, in this section Prabhupada is talking about reading transcendental literature, and so really bringing out the importance of reading regularly, daily, keeping in touch with this transcendental sound vibration, which purifies our intelligence and is our immediately cuts through this illusion that we are continuously surrounded by. It has such a deep impact. I remember when it was very funny because when Lokadaksha was in the prep room before the operation, we were reading from 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and those verses, we've read those verses so many times, you know, but reading it in that specific context, you know, those words had such an impact. They really cut through the fear and the anxiety and the illusion that somehow I can hold on to this material world. And Prabhupada's words are and have that very specific quality of dispelling illusion and generating a sense of fearlessness, because he doesn't mince around, he doesn't beat around the bush, but he just comes to the direct point. So I just really like this, and I really love this line here that Prabhupada's using, that if one doesn't practice remembering Krishna while he's struggling for existence, then it will not be possible for him to remember Krishna at the time of death. So all these difficult situations, circumstances that we encounter are really opportunities for us to take shelter. I think you were mentioning that before, that we have so many different shelters that we try to take in this material world. But all those shelters are, like Prabhupada uses the word, fallible soldiers. That means that they can give up on us at any moment, including the shelter we may take of our own body, what to speak of our relatives and our friends and our wealth and the whatever else that it is that we may be trying to take shelter of. But when we are going through these difficult times in our life, then it really gives us a very unique opportunity to really try and take shelter of Krishna's holy names, and there's such a nice glorification of that. Because if we do that, then it prepares us so we can try, at least we can, you know, maybe think of Krishna, because that is supposed to be the greatest calamity, right? The time of death when all our faculties are going away. all our shelters are taken away from us. Our very existence that we think, we have a reference point that this is who I am is actually under siege at the time. So, anyways, just really liked this section a lot.
It's really interesting that Prabhupada here says that he does not advise Arjuna simply to remember him and give up his occupation. No, the Lord never suggests anything impractical. This is very interesting, right? Krishna can suggest that everybody become just Babajis and just remember me and don't do anything. What will happen if that was the case? If we were to give up our occupations or natural born talents and just try to remember Krishna, what will happen? What will happen? I mean, that's the goal, but if you start out with that, what will happen? Why is Krishna not saying that just stop doing anything and just chant my name continuously and don't do anything else? What will happen? Yes, Swarna.
It's basically trying to convince, let's say someone who doesn't exercise to run a 5K on the first day of exercising. You have to start with something small that's manageable. Something that's manageable.
That's very good. It makes it practical for us. Prabhupada gives there was a devotee who went to Mayapur and he was trying to follow Haridas Thakur by chanting 192 rounds. So, when Prabhupada heard about him, he didn't say much. And then, in 2 or 3 weeks, that devotee completely disappeared. Nobody found out about him. So, disappeared means he went away. So, I guess we are in the material world and we have to find the connection between this material world and the spiritual world. If you try to do it prematurely, then it's against the scriptures. And Rupa Goswami says, Shruti, Smriti, Puranadi, Pancharatra ki vidhi vina, ekantaki hare bhakti, utpata eva kalpate. If you don't follow the instructions of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, Adi, it's all the Vedic literatures. And if you try to pretend like this, I will constantly remember Krishna 24 hours a day like that. The Shastras don't prescribe that. All the Shastras, our whole Vedic system is called also Varnashram system, which means everybody is engaged according to the material propensities in some occupational duty. So the society is divided into Varna and Ashrama, and according to that we try to engage our tendencies. We have to get rid of our material tendencies by engaging them in Krishna's service. And at the same time while we are doing that, Krishna says, Mam Anusmara Yuddhacha. Anusmara, which means following the footsteps of great souls. Anu means to follow, and Smara. Not just Smara. Smara means just remember according to your own will and fancy. Different people can come up with different ways of remembering Krishna. You can see that so many Apasampradayas came about because they try to remember Krishna according to their own imagination and always creates catastrophe. As Rupa Goswami says, Utpata eva kalpate. Utpat means disturbance, great disturbance to the society. And everybody takes on their own way of remembering Krishna or serving Krishna. So we have to follow in the footsteps of great acharyas while taking care of our responsibilities in this material world. Because what that will do is free us from this desire for fruitive activities, which is a deep desire, very deep desire in the heart of the soul, that I want to enjoy this material world. So it has to be reversed. And this Narad Muni says in the Bhagavatam, first canto, 5th chapter, he says whatever caused the disease, that same thing will cure the disease. So he gives the example of somebody eats too many milk sweets, then he will have a kind of a runny stomach, and that can be solved by another product of the milk, which is yogurt. So he says this karmic tendency that we have is very deep rooted, and it cannot be uprooted just by simply trying to artificially remember Krishna. We have to engage our activities in service of Krishna, and then we'll gradually give up that desire. So we'll open it up for things that you liked and want to talk about.
Any thoughts or reflections? Vrinda, anything that you want?
I was just thinking that over time it becomes very obvious for us. For example, chanting the Mahamantra is so much around us that we kind of become oblivious. We forget the importance of it.
Yeah.
Even though it's around us 24/7, there is some kirtan playing, or we're chanting, or hearing some lecture. So I'm just trying to relate to that how do we maintain and rejuvenate the enthusiasm that I feel it. I'm not sure. I feel that it kind of wears down over time, and because Krishna is saying you have to remember me every moment. Now you do it. You've been doing it for a few years now. You think it's obvious. Yeah, Prabhupada says this every time. You stop paying attention to the purpose when you're reading it, and kind of say, yeah, I know what Prabhupada is going to say. How do we? And it's kind of very opposite of what we're supposed to do. How do we rejuvenate our enthusiasm, and how do we maintain it?
I'm sure there are so many different answers and so many different things that we could maybe discuss, but what comes to my mind is just a very personal experience that as we chant and as we go through this process of finding ourselves with less and less and less shelters in the material world, then one can no longer try and maintain a superficial relationship with the holy name. One cannot afford to maintain a superficial relationship because that is the process of purification. Where else are you going to take shelter of? What else is one going to do? What else is there in this material world where I can find a resting place? And we want a resting place. It's the nature of the living entity that we are dependent energy. We are not independent energy. So where can I depend? And that is Krishna's special mercy. Through the process of chanting, that one of the reasons why we don't feel a specific attraction to the holy name is because we have so many other attractions. Because we are attracted to so many other things, that we have shelter, we have taken shelter, or we have accepted shelter. We use the word surrender, right? And I was listening to a lecture by, it was Burijan Prabhu. Hare Krishna, finally, huh? So I was lectured by Burijan Prabhu or Sachidananda Maharaj, and he was saying, Sachidananda Maharaj, he was saying that actually the word surrender is really not a true translation of the word Sharanagati. Sharanagati is really taking shelter. Where am I taking shelter? And so when we find that all other places where we can potentially take shelter are fallible, they can give away at any moment, then one is forced to redirect one's energy or one's attention to the holy name and say, well, here I am, without any support, without any other shelter. Now what am I going to do? Can I afford to ignore you? And if I do ignore you, then what do I do? So and that's why they say that for a devotee, Prabhupada uses this. He says, crying like a child cries in a helpless condition for one's mother. So we are not in a helpless condition, but we can pray to Krishna. That's why Kunti Devi is praying, that please continue to send me more and more difficulties, because in those moments of difficulties, I'm able to call out to you more sincerely. So it's really this whole illusion that we have that somehow I'm okay and that I've figured everything out. I was just thinking today that, it's embarrassing in this material world to come out and say that I haven't figured it out at anything. There's nothing that I really am capable of, or I know, It's what we want to cover up. Our whole culture, our education, our strength is all about covering up that feeling of being vulnerable and saying, actually, I'm okay. I know, I figured it out. I have all my ducks in a row. I have education, I have strength, I have this and I have that. But to just sort of say, well, Krishna, really, I don't really know how to play this material game. And Visheshika Prabhu always talks, I mean, I've heard him say at least once about, sort of quitting, signing out, and saying, I've logged out, signed out, I don't know how to play this game anymore. Then what do you do? Anyways, I'm sure there are many other ways to look at it, but just something that's been on my own mind.
You raised a good point that how do we maintain that enthusiasm on a day-to-day basis? How do we feel rejuvenated? Because we find Krishna to be fresh. Like when we start, we are enthusiastic, we are in the beginner's mind, and everything about Krishna consciousness is very attractive. And as years pass by, then yeah, I know this, I know that. And that mentality creeps in because familiarity breeds contempt. And on the contrary, we see that how Parikshit Maharaj, when he's hearing from Bhagavatam, then he's feeling fresh. He says in many places in Bhagavatam that it's so enjoyable to hear Bhagavatam from you and about Krishna, because every time I hear, I'm getting fresh meaning. So, one practical way to always feel that fresh enthusiasm is to take on something which is a little bit outside of our comfort zone. Take on some service for Krishna, some project for Krishna that is outside of our comfort zone. Because this material world, we always try to be comfortable. This is a mantra that we develop right from the very beginning, that I want to be comfortable in this material world. And we do so many different things to become comfortable. But that is a trap, because we can never be comfortable in this material world. This material world is not designed. You cannot find any ingredients in this material world, including Bhumi, Rapo, Anolo, Vayu, Kham, Mano, Buddhir. There are only 8 elements working in this material world. These 5 gross elements and 3 subtle elements. So out of any combination of these 8 elements, you cannot construct or build or make anything that will make us comfortable. And we can take the example of Hiranyakashipu. Today only I was reading his story, how he went through extreme austerity because he wanted to become the most comfortable guy in this universe. And he acquired extreme powers, almost equal to less than Brahma and Lord Shiva. He was the next most powerful guy. And he really became comfortable. And that comfort actually became his biggest enemy, because then he started thinking that I am God. So this feeling of comfort makes us feel, gives us a false sense of feeling that I'm God, or I'm equal to God, or I can be God. So this practical way is to convert this desire of being comfortable to being always uncomfortable in service of Krishna, and being always in anxiety, taking on something that is a little bit more difficult, not something very easy. And that will force us to, when you look at the lives of these great souls who were Prabhupada's disciples, Prabhupada himself, he took on something very, very difficult. And all his disciples, they also took on projects and tasks that were very difficult, way beyond, like this devotee is going to San Francisco and starting a completely new center there. Prabhupada sending 3 of his couples to England, and without any money, without anything, go and start a whole center, whole Krishna consciousness movement there. And they were forced to think every single day, how do I surrender to Krishna? What can I? So when the mind is always, therefore Krishna says, Maya Arpita Mano Buddhi. Our mind and Buddhi, Arpita Mana and Buddhi, they are dedicated to being comfortable right now in this material world. So Krishna says, move that from that, mind and Buddhi from that, and become uncomfortable in serving me. And throughout our life, if we are always in that anxiety and uncomfortable in serving Krishna, then we'll find Krishna very fresh every day. Because then we'll be forced to, Krishna, this is not, I can't do it. I can't do it. I need your shelter. I need your help. And Krishna will present himself in newer and newer ways to us when we are challenged in this material world in serving him. So that's another way to approach this problem.
It's a great question. Any further reflections or thoughts?
No, I really like that.
Yeah.
Gave a practical way of putting ourselves in an uncomfortable situation. I've realized that.
Yeah.
I get motivated, but when I get very comfortable, my whole sadhana starts lacking.
Yeah.
Because I've just started taking everything for granted.
Yeah.
So laxity is kind of not helpful.
Yeah, complacency is the nature of this material world.
And it's not helpful for myself.
Yeah, and that's why, when we talk about this act of going out and distributing this mercy, it's that's why Vaishnava Prabhu calls it high sadhana, because it keeps us. I really like your response, that it really keeps us on the edge, and in order to execute that, one has to really chant with attention, and also the reciprocation that one experiences as a result of doing that. And at the same time, there's also this whole internal world of Krishna consciousness where one finds that there is no other shelter. How else is one going to execute any of these services? Or how else is one going to even continue in this life? Where else is one going to put one's attention? All other forms of attention that we put in so many different things, they pale in comparison. I mean, it happens to me sometimes, like if I'm trying to browse, after a while I think, not even after a while, after 2 minutes, I'm like, there's no place to go even on the internet. Like, how many websites can you visit? They all say the same thing, right? I mean, how many news websites can you visit? It's like, then you realize that this is the length and breadth of this material world. From Washington Post to New York Times, from Hindustan Times to something else. I mean, that's it, right? There's nothing else beyond the sphere. So you realize that this material world actually has so little to offer. And then one has to then direct one's attention. So, nice point. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was thinking about why Krishna is not saying stop doing whatever you're doing and just chant my name. Trying to relate. If everyone just stop whatever they're doing and just chant, I'm just trying to relate. Probably system will not run. Like for example, if farmers stop growing food,
Yeah.
then nobody will get the food to eat.
Yeah.
Basically, the system will not run.
Yeah.
Just trying to relate.
Yeah.
That's
It's,
a good point.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. At a very practical level too. Things have to happen, and it keeps us regulated. It purifies our existence. This occupation that we have, if it is done with the proper consciousness as an act of offering, then it's purifying. Actually, the entire Varnashram system is an act of, ultimately, it's to purify the living entity of this tendency for material enjoyment. So, thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
I just heard like Guru Maharaj's lecture, and he was pointing out like at one thing, he was saying that how this material energy is the energy of mind, and it's very powerful, but it's disaligned. It's not aligned. It's not in alignment. So if you try to align yourself with the disalignment, disaligned energy, you would never be aligned. So you lose your drive. So
That's very nice. Yeah. Yeah. Anything from you?
Just remembering a story from a talk in Watford Manor, and one of the devotees was talking about this verse, and it was a verse about whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his present body, in his next life he will attain to that state without fail. So he was talking about another Prabhu that he somehow was in a situation where he was drowning, and he was a devotee for 15 years, chanting 16 rounds a day. And as he was drowning, he looked up, he opened his eyes and looked up, and he could see the bubbles, the bubbles that go up. And he wasn't thinking of Krishna, he was thinking about an advert, a commercial from when he was a child, for washing up liquid. So to wash your dishes, it's an English commercial,
Okay.
Fairy Liquid. So it just, the commercial just went, Fairy Liquid. And, and somehow he was saved, like he sort of, but that was as he was drowning. He all these sadhana,
Yeah.
and he got more intense, and had to realize, at that moment, when he was close to it, he thought about a commercial.
Yeah.
And that's how powerful the material world is. And, chanting so much, but then
Yeah.
the commercial came in his head at the time of death.
Yeah.
It's such a sad reality.
It is such a
So,
sadness.
yeah, but when I look at like YouTube, you get an advert, and you're just like, I hope that doesn't come at the time of the time of death.
And I guess again, going back to Premnam's question, I think also connects back to that point that it's in these moments where we find ourselves so vulnerable, where we realize that what am I doing? Do I have enough shelter? I'm sure this devotee came back with this experience like, gosh, I have a long way, I cannot afford to be superficial.
Watching commercials.
Yeah, superficial with the holy name anymore. I have to get deep into it, because at that moment, what else am I going to hold on to? So, yeah, but for us it's washing powder Nirma in India. It's like every single place, Anything, Shobha? We're reading from, we just finished reading, let me just, bring you guys up. Page 23. So, this is the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita. So, we're just reading from the introduction right now. So, we talked about how whatever state one remembers when he quits his present body, that's the state that we remember. So, what am I saying? That's the, when he quits his present body, in his life, next life, he will attain to that state without fail. So we talked about that, and then we're just talking about Krishna saying about how we can perform our activity in such a way that we can be constantly remembering him at the same time. So, Bhaktilata, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, after he said that story, I remembered like how Guru Maharaj says this material world is so sticky. Like it's like he gives the example of many examples. He gives like a tar baby, and then he gives the example of some sap sticking on the dress, and you look for the solvent. So I was thinking about all that. Yeah.
Finally let go, because otherwise it can cause so much of anxiety and fear. Our fear quotient is directly connected to how stuck we are in this material world, right? So with Prabhu, anything?
ये मंत्रा तो इतना पावरफुल है. मैं एक बार मायापुर जा रही थी. मायापुर से जब हम दर्शन करके वापस आए, मेरी बेटी साथ में थी, और रास्ते में वृंदावन के थे वो डिवोटी, जो मतलब कि प्रेसिडेंट का लड़का था. वो तो बाद में पता चला मेरे को. तो उसके साथ 6-7 और लड़के थे. वो हमारे साथ, उन्होंने देखा कि ये माँ बेटी बैठी हैं, तो हमारे साथ हमें डिस्टर्ब करना चाहते थे, पंगा लेना चाहते थे. मगर जब उन्होंने इतना देखा ना कि ये तो मतलब कि बैठी हैं, तो हम इनके साथ कोई गड़बड़ करेंगे. एक फैमिली इलाहाबाद से चढ़ी. उन्होंने वो एक बुजुर्ग ना लेटे हुए थे 2-3 सीट पे. तो हमने उनको जगाया नहीं. मैं तो सो रही है, चलो इतनी लॉन्ग जर्नी है. तो वो सो रहे थे. हम एक खाली और पड़ी थी सीट, उसी के ऊपर हम बैठ गए. इलाहाबाद से जो फैमिली आई ना, वो उसने लड़ना शुरू कर दिया हमारे साथ कि आप हमारी सीट आइए, आप यहाँ से खड़े हो. हमने कोई बात नहीं, वो हमारी सीट से वो सो रहे हैं, तो हम उनको जगा देंगे, तो फिर हम वहाँ शिफ्ट हो जाएंगे. मगर जब वो उठाया फिर उनको, तो जब हम वहाँ शिफ्ट हुए, जो हमारी ये जपमाला थी ना, हमने वहाँ शिफ्ट की. तो उसको जो प्रेसिडेंट का लड़का था, उसने देखा कि माता जी के पास ये जपमाला है. तो वो मेरा जो कजन बेटा था ना, उसने बोला कि ये माला, उसको पूछा कि ये माला किसकी है. तो उसने कहा ये माता जी की है. तो कहते हैं फिर वो उसने जब मेरे को पूछा, माता जी आप दीक्षित हो बेटा? तो तब तो मैंने हमारे लक्ष्मींद्र स्वामी जी का ही नाम लिया, क्योंकि वो हमारे बहुत आते जाते थे. तो फिर उन्होंने, वो जो प्रेसिडेंट का लड़का था ना, उसको लगा कि ये माता जी तो हमारे स्पॉन से हैं. तो उसने जब उसका बदल गया ना कि अब हमने कुछ नहीं कहना, तो दूसरे लड़कों का भी वही बिहेवियर हो गया कि हमने अब इनको डिस्टर्ब नहीं करना, ये हमारे स्पॉन से हैं. तो वो जो दूसरी फैमिली थी जो हमें हमारे साथ फाइट कर रही थी, उन्होंने कहा माता जी हम इनका सामान उठा के बाहर फेंक दें. मैं कहा ये नहीं करना. मैं कहा जो जहाँ बैठे हैं उनको बैठने दो. आप ये देखो, अगर थैली इतनी पावरफुल है तो नाम कितना पावरफुल होगा.
हाँ बिल्कुल. That's very nice. It's very nice. Very powerful. Anyways, I don't know. What should we do? Anything else? Anything else that stood out for you from this section that we just read? That was a good point, though. Delhi keeps strong at the holy name. Strong. That's nice.
when I try to talk to people who are not exposed to the Vedas, now we know a lot of Vedic literature that talk about, Ekadashi and all that, purify your soul, but they don't have that in their scriptures. They don't. So my question is, for them to purify, since they don't have the material that we are exposed to here, how do they, follow the path of getting purified and go so that, because they don't follow it, because they don't know what it is.
In other traditions?
Huh?
You mean other religions?
Yeah, like I was talking to a good friend of mine, talking about Ekadashi. They had no idea what it was, and I was trying to explain to them, and so there are ideas of the ideas, the dualism, the God is in one place and you are here. So how do you? So their realizations are different. So is that? How do you relate that so that we can ensure that they are also on the right path? They are following their religion as long as it follows the right path. So how is it? I've always been thinking people don't have exposed to the Vedas, but how will they?
Just talking about the principles and not the specifics. That always works.
No, that's what I do. I don't know about but still.
And I think in every tradition they have some rituals where they are doing some austerities. There are different austerities, different traditions do. So all those austerities are ultimately coming from Krishna only. And seeing the Vedic path, how the Vedic path is pervading all the paths. Ultimately, the knowledge of how to purify ourselves and how to connect with Krishna comes from the Vedas. And based on the time, place and circumstances in different universes, different parts of the universes, it gets presented in different ways. So seeing the same nature of the science being practiced in different way. And people may not be able to connect with the specifics, but they will appreciate the main principle.
When I try to talk to people, I want to make sure that I relate to how they have been brought up what religious, so that I can relate to be similar, so that they won't totally feel overwhelmed.
Right. No, that's the right thing to do.
For example, in Catholics, they also have the beads.
Yeah.
And they also have Lent, the austerity.
Yeah, of course. In all traditions, and this is the beauty of, one of the things that really attracts me, to the Vedic paradigm is that there is a place for everyone. That, there is no one that is exempt, so the understanding is that as long as someone is trying to follow something, which involves certain amount of letting go, some kind of sacrifice, even within our entire Vedic paradigm, what to speak of stepping outside of this paradigm, there are people in India who engage in a variety of worship, right? People who, engage in, sacrifice, animal sacrifice, for example, whatever, there's so many different things, and that all somehow or the other sort of fits into this broader paradigm, that as long as one is trying in some way to execute some austerity or sacrifice, there's some purification that is coming about. So it's a very broad-minded approach, a very sort of accommodating approach, where not everyone is going to be on exactly the same level, and we don't see that as a disadvantage, because we realize that it's a journey. It's not if you don't do this in this one lifetime, then you're going to hell and you're damned forever. It's not like that. It's a journey, and people may choose to plug in at different levels and make their own progress in due course of time.
But unfortunately, in some of the religions, that's exactly what they teach. If you don't follow their path, you go to hell.
Yeah.
Which I found that very difficult.
Yeah, as long as we have a good understanding that we should not, and this is one of the things that as practitioners, we should be very careful not to disturb or agitate the minds of those that may have a certain belief system, because they are engaged in some worship with some kind of faith, and at that point, perhaps that's all they can understand. That's perhaps their, extent of understanding. So as mature practitioners, we should simply encourage them, and they appreciate that. When like for example, when we go door to door, right, our book distribution, we meet people who may be very hardcore or sort of slightly fanatical. So we can encourage them and say, actually, like Vaishnav Prabhu says, the world actually needs more people like yourself. People of faith are the ones, so just sort of encouraging and fanning their spark is very, very powerful. So one should let go of this tendency that I need to convince every single person or bring them to a certain level. One have to realize it's such an internal process, and I think it makes a deeper impact. I was hearing, I think it was Saint Francis of Assisi. He said that I preach all day, and every once in a while I use a few words. So sometimes just our behavior might have a deeper impact. So. Is there anybody else? Shona. He had a long talk on the flight. It's so good to have you. The kids, today is a very much smaller group, so some of the kids are missing. But how old is your daughter again?
She's 9.
Oh, so she would fit into Tarani's class. Would she like to join?
Yeah, I can take her.
You can take her? Okay. So the class, Bhaktilata, can
Yeah,
you take?
yeah.
And your son is older, right?
My son is 14.
Okay, so he would be in, Bhaktilata's class. But the kids are all missing. This is Swarnab. How old are you, Swarnab?
12.
You're 12. Okay. So he's one of the students, but the others are all traveling.
Traveling?
Where are they?
I have no idea.
Yeah, they're somewhere. They're not here. So,
Minor point. The way Krishna says that there is no doubt, and Prabhupada stresses it out very. So Bhagavad Gita is a book. I see that it's a book about encouragement. It's not necessarily telling us a set rules and asking us to follow it. It's this enlightening and encouraging, and then Krishna gives us a choice. But then he stresses something that there is no doubt. If you follow this, you'll come to. So that's very encouraging.
yeah, it's both, right? It's both. And when Krishna says, "This is my opinion," it's like, yeah, right. I mean, if it's your opinion, what does that really even mean?
No, that's why in the beginning, Prabhupada starts with, you should start with faith.
Yeah.
If you don't have faith, then everything else you read will be just reading.
Right.
So with that faith, when Krishna says his no opinion, then you know he is the Lord, then that Lord's opinion carries a lot of weight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like some XYZ telling you an opinion. So if you have that faith then continues, then that will become stronger and stronger.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yes.
Mataji, so how do you define death if soul doesn't die?
How do you define death?
If soul doesn't, if nobody can cut the soul, burn the soul.
How do you define death?
I mean, death is defined as a change of body, simply. So, when the soul leaves one body and goes to another body, that is defined as death. Even there are 5 kinds of death that is defined in the scriptures. One kind of death is even when we go to sleep at night, that is also defined as one of the death or pralaya. It's like a very mini pralaya. We completely forget who we are, and we kind of leave this body and then come back again. So there is also, yes.
So some people do not believe in reincarnation.
Huh?
Some people do not believe in
Reincarnation.
They do not believe in it, especially Buddhist people.
Right.
They come, they do not believe in it.
Right.
How do you explain?
I mean, death is, you don't have to explain reincarnation. Death is when something, Prabhupada says, something leaves this body and then the body is no longer functioning. Right, so, I mean, at least everybody believes in death. Right, the body was there, functioning, and suddenly it's not functioning, so that is death. And what happens after that, again, that's, if you don't want to believe, that's fine, but at least up to this point, everybody believes. The body is there and it's not there anymore.
Prabhupada actually gives a very sort of practical understanding of reincarnation. He says, we are reincarnating just in this very lifetime, right? That we are changing bodies. And so where is the question? He said, this is not a religious fact, it's just a common sense idea that in this very lifetime, the body that we have now is not the body we had 20 years ago. So where is that body gone? So in this lifetime, we have changed bodies already. So death is simply a final change. So but the difference is in this body, when we change our bodies, we remember the previous body. So death is simply a change of body where we don't remember the previous bodies. Forgetfulness of the previous body. So that is so it's very simple and very common sense, which does not require, too much of I guess grey matter really to understand. Yeah, and of course, having said that, there are people who may have different ideas, and again, it's all right. It's all right. Not everyone will. Though I was reading a Pew research, and they were saying how more and more people in America actually believe in the concept of reincarnation. So it's really picking up. Yeah, go ahead. You had something else, yeah? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think Prabhupada in one of the magazines, when he was doing an interview with some Australian reporter. So, I mean, I think, like you said, Prabhupada is very direct. He says, whether you believe it or not, it happens. You can see it happening all the time.
Yeah.
You see sometimes kids are born with so much ability. From where did that ability come from?
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't even started talking yet, but they still have, memories of certain things. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing to explain is by, the reincarnation and the taking of the body. I mean, otherwise, where would the memories come from?
Sure. Swarnam, any thoughts from you?
Oh, no, not really.
Yeah. How is this compared to your discussions downstairs? This is easier, right?
At least for the teacher, this easier.
Manipur, any thoughts? Yeah. Okay. How about you? Any thoughts from you? Yeah. Anything that you read or heard from this section that we just read that stood out for you, or you want to, bring out? Take a look again and see. Rupa Goswami defines that how there are so many injunctions, rules and regulations that's given, and kind of connects back to your point, Ananda Kumar Prabhu, that different traditions, different, even within the same religion, there's so many rules and regulations. But out of all those rules, there's one rule that is actually the main rule. Everything else is a servant of that rule. And the main rule is to always remember Krishna and never to forget him. So this constant remembrance, Kirtanya Sadahari, this constant remembrance of the Supreme Lord is our goal. And anything that supports that.
And I think every religion says that you have to serve the Lord with love.
Yes.
And
that's a common thing.
Common
right?
this thing. I mean,
Yeah.
once you follow that, that is true religion. But,
That is exactly.
so that's what I tell people,
Yeah.
so that everybody can understand.
Yeah.
So it's easier.
Finding common ground to connect, so that builds bridges. Hemant Prabhu, any thoughts from you? Anything that you read from this section that you'd like to reflect back?
I was thinking about Premdam Prabhu's point. I mean, I think it's a conscious effort to keep it going in the devices, and you'll have to maintain that intensity. I mean, until it is part of your routine. I guess I don't think at least there is no other way. Two opinions about it. Have to keep it.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, I was thinking that another point that came to my mind was how you maintain that freshness is to develop this mamta with Krishna. That Krishna is mine. It's like when we have mamta with our children, and then continuously we are thinking about their welfare, right? We're continuously planning which class to take them to. This teacher is not good, so let me change the class. What will they do? What kind of job they will get? And how will they cope with this? So because we have mamta, then we are constantly thinking about their welfare. So if we can develop a part of that mamta for Krishna, then we'll be thinking, how can I serve Krishna? How can I please him? What will he be happy with? So then it becomes automatic. Once there is a tiny fraction of that mamta, right now we are just doing it out of rules and regulations. Karna padega, I have to do it somehow. But if you turn that around a little bit, then we have an experience of that world where we are automatically self-driven to even work, slog it out for 24 hours, 48 hours. When it comes to somebody we love, we are able to give ourselves completely to that person. So, and then there is no question of, nothing is boring at that point, right? We don't find taking care of people who we love boring at any point. Even if it's a little bit boring, then still we do it with full enthusiasm. So, developing that sense of that Krishna is mine. Krishna is not separate. He's not separate that I have to serve him. He's mine. He's part of my family, and I am his. So when we try to develop that sense, then so many other things, they just vanish from our head. It's not a calculation anymore. It's not burdensome anymore. It's not boring anymore. It's something very, I want to give. I want to give.
I mean, you mentioned kids. I don't know, maybe it will work with Krishna, but with kids, too much obsession, I don't think it's good for kids. And same way, I was thinking maybe if you're putting too much pressure on yourself to do that, I don't know, maybe it can put you in
Too much pressure to do what?
To do like for kids, like if you're thinking about like it's too much, like you need to do this and that and that.
It doesn't work. It's actually, and that's actually a really, really good point, that we have so much that we want to give, right? But you know, when we try to give it to any other, you know, for example, you know, when you buy a rose bush, they always say don't overwater the leaves, right? Because the tree starts to rot. Is that true, Sanju Prabhu? That if you water on the top of the leaves, then it will start to rot. So they say, you know, just water the root. So it's the same thing that we want to give. But when, you know, just like what you're saying, there is something called overwatering a plant. And then if you overwater it, then actually instead of having a healthy plant, you don't have a healthy plant. But Krishna, he has the capacity to receive unlimitedly. And so just like with the whole Govardhan pastime, you know, he keeps saying, Ani or, give me more, give me more.
Krishna can receive, I mean, whatever you can give, but I'm talking about the person. If he is trying to give too much, putting that much stress on himself, I mean, might not
crash and
able to
burn.
continue.
And that's also true. So that's where we have to take this process in a gradual manner. So we have to take steps to see, are we in the comfort zone, are we in the stretch zone, are we in the pain zone? So we want to also not be in the comfort zone. So Krishna says, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam. So I'll say, yeah, Krishna is happy with the Patram Pushpam, so I can just give him that, and that's all right. But if I can give him more, then let me give him more. But also not, if that's beyond my adhikar or qualification, then if I try to give more, then I'll develop some anger or resentment, and I might start feeling like, why? Prabhupada says that it's so funny. He says, when you make a plate and offer it to Krishna, Krishna just, you know, he will just, you know, accept the offering with his eyes, right? And he'll leave it for us. But what if he didn't? What if he actually ate it? Then maybe one day we'll say, Krishna, you're eating too much now, you know? So, you know, so yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that we have to, because we are not ready, so Krishna also reciprocates with us, you know, on that same level. But you have a very valid point, that we cannot give beyond our capacity, but the point is that we should also not give, you know, less than our capacity. So we should find how much we can give honestly, and that requires a little bit of honesty and integrity on our part. No one else can tell us. Right? It's our own, yeah. Nice point. Yeah.
I mean, I have one related to this. Like today's Ekadashi, right? How much okay it is to tell your kids, you know, remind them today's Ekadashi. I mean, though they won't keep back, but how good it is to remind them often. Because at the end, sometimes the little one starts saying, I wish it was not Ekadashi.
Yeah, again, goes back to his point. Pain zone, stretch zone, comfort zone, you know, and ultimately, you know, at this point when they're younger, you know, we can cook for them and we can give it to them, and it's a good training, it's a good samskara. But at some point they'll have to own it, right? They'll have to, so we can encourage them, but we also have to give them the choice. They should not grow up feeling there's a bad taste, that, oh, I hated Ekadashis, and you know. I mean, another thing is that there are, you know, we may also have to enter into the world of creative cooking. There is a lot of exciting things happening in the world of Ekadashi that we could perhaps have a separate cuisine called Ekadashi cuisine, you know.
She's making like Ekadashi cookies.
Ekadashi cookies, Ekadashi pasta, Ekadashi pizza, Ekadashi, you know, you name it. I mean, it's like a whole cuisine, you know. that too. But at the same time, I mean, you know, letting not. I guess the one thing we should be very careful of not doing is pushing them, you know, or making them feel, you know, like, you know, and waiting. And ultimately, they'll have to one day look at everything that they've done and then go right, Prabhu, go through the whole process of actually taking it, right? So they may take everything till they're 13, 14, 15, and then they're going to maybe go through a phase where they may look again and decide how much I want to really take, and that's when it's their own, right? So we do the best. Our own example, actually, this is, you know, that is actually the best kind of giving to anyone. Our own example, our own taste, our own enthusiasm, our own faith, our own practices. There is no greater teaching than that. It's just powerful. You know, when they see that you have a taste, then they want to know, what are you tasting in there? You know, so.
Is Ekadashi fasting, or is that, I mean, because if all the literatures, Vedic literatures, like the Prabhu, you send up that link, I read, talk about fasting, you know, even Nirjala, you know, but people have a lot of cooking on, so
that's Prabhupada.
So, which is, I mean, is it okay to, I mean, I guess.
It's a whole spectrum. One can be on any part of the spectrum, so.
It depends on your body type and service, what you're doing. If you can handle fasting, then just do it. If you can't handle fasting, then do what you can. But at least not eating grains and rice and beans. That is the minimum. And the main focus of Ekadashi is to reduce eating so we can chant and hear more. That is the main purpose. Not just fasting and not thinking of Krishna is not the best outcome from Ekadashi, right? We have to increase our remembrance of Krishna on Ekadashi or any holy day. That is the real benefit. And fasting is just a way to cut down on our time that we need for eating.
Just asking, what is the question? What was the question? What was the question of?
Children, you know, sometimes they perform Ekadashi, but then they're restless.
I mean, they want to do it. It's
Fast.
not like they want to do it. If I give them, like, you know, chapati or something, the first question they'll ask is it Ekadashi food that you're giving us? But at the same time, they have this feeling.
And it's also hard.
Very hard.
And it's good to acknowledge it. You know? It's good to acknowledge. I remember Mukunda Maharaj, you know, every Ekadashi, we used to be with him. In my heart, I used to think, oh, today's Ekadashi. And we would go see Maharaj, and Maharaj said, today is a very auspicious day, it's Ekadashi. So then I would reorient myself and say, yeah, it's an auspicious day. It's not a difficult day, you know. So sometimes, you know, it's true. I mean, even as adults, we find it difficult. What to speak of kids, right? It's a difficult, so you know, it's all right. Yeah, it's hard, but that's, you know, it's an austerity, and they have to pick it up, and, you know, and, yeah. Just.
So I have experience to share on that. Like, I am fasting on Janmashtami since I remember, maybe 4, 5 or whatever. Because my parents used to fast, and I used to get whatever they were eating, and I never realized obviously, right? But then, and I continued. I mean, since then I
You've
never
continued,
so yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I never felt like why I did.
That's nice. That's nice.
So I guess again depends. I mean, you do what you see. Right?
Yeah, you definitely do what you see. That's true. That's true.
And then the complaining is well taken. I mean, and if you don't resist that complaining and acknowledge it, then you'll also feel that I've been heard. And we also complain. Everybody complains about things.
Especially when you see some nice food in front of you,
Yeah.
and then suddenly you're highly tempted.
Yeah, that's true. Alright, so I think we don't have anything else. We can maybe stop here. What's the time?
It's like that.
Oh, did realize that. Thank you so much for coming, Manipur. Yeah, we wanted to actually, that's true. So because today we talked about the power of reading scriptures and the power of associating with the sound vibration. So we are thinking that on 4th of July, which is a holiday for most people, of doing sort of like a 4-hour or a 5-hour marathon of just reading Bhagavatam straight. Like we'll just come together, have some prasadam here, and then we'll just read Bhagavatam, have reflections, continue reading, maybe some kirtan in between, but mostly just reading Bhagavatam. So we would like to invite, it's 4th of July, and Prabhu, you're working?
Yes.
All day? Okay.
4th of July. 5th I'm off, but like 3rd, 4th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 6th.
6th also. Okay. Is everyone else working on Friday? Yeah, John is.
Friday I'm not working.
I know you're not working, just asking. I mean, are you guys all off on Friday? Everyone's working.
Where in England?
Most of the people are working, right? So 4th of July is the only day. Okay, so yeah, we'll and then we'll have a Sankirtan meeting after that. So we want to talk about distributing Bhagavatam sets and launching Bhadra Purnima campaign, which is coming up. So we'll have a meeting after that. So please let us know who's available on the 4th, and I think it'll be exciting. We've done that with Vaisheshika Prabhu in Govardhan, and it's so ecstatic just to come together and just read Bhagavatam and share, and especially the association of devotees. It's just very, very powerful. So we'll try to do that.
What time?
What time? It's a good question. We can start at 10